Back then, I was really spending a lot of time learning about personal finance. I was listening to all the podcasts, I was reading the books, trying to essentially kind of carve out a percentage point here and a percentage point there.
A personal finance obsessed, former jazz musician who speaks 8 languages and runs one of the most successful education businesses in the country. Olly Richards is the perfect example of why you should never stop learning.
The exact same knowledge in my head, applied in a slightly different way and distributed via the internet, now worth millions. How can that be the case?
Olly, one thing I learned about you voice noted me once and said that you were obsessed with personal finance when you were a kid. Well, in your early 20s, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that come about?
So I think that came about because my parents were always very conservative with money, and would always say, you have to be saving, you have to, always have some money in the bank, always, take out an ISA and all of that. So I had that drilled into me from an early age. So even when I was first starting out and not making much money, I still had this voice in my head saying, oh, you should be saving a certain amount, you should have an ISA. And so I was always following personal finance stuff because, if you don't have much money, well, you want to make the most of it, right? And so I was well tuned into that from an early age.
What was the sort of ambition or goal with the personal finance stuff?
It's funny because it was and it in a funny way still is, and probably always will be, this voice in my head that said, when you get to retirement, you have to have enough money. Because I had this strong fear, rational or not, I think it is rational, but I had this really strong fear of getting to, 65 or 70, whatever, and then not having enough money to live on. And because it's the way that it's always presented, right? You save and invest so that when you get to a certain point in your life, you have enough money to retire, because you don't want to be stacking shelves when you're 90, right? And so I think I had that abstract notion that you have to prepare for that, and so that all of my other activity in my life and work became organized around this abstract goal of be okay in 50 years' time.
But you didn't have much money.
No.
And it actually became a detriment in terms of your quality of life at the time, right?
Yeah. So for the first few years of my life, I was a jazz musician. So I was doing 40 quid gigs in pubs on the other side of the country, and living very much like gig to gig. I was doing that till I was mid to late 20s. And then I was an English teacher after that. I never had any earning power whatsoever. But the thing is, that makes it even more acute in your mind, because I remember sitting down and thinking, okay, if I want to have, say, 30K a year to live on when I retire, that means I'm going to have to save, it was something like 400 or 500 quid a month at the time when I first started taking that seriously. And it was a huge amount, it was half of my take-home salary, right? But I thought, what do I prefer? Do I prefer to ignore it and then, have no money at all when I retire, or do I prefer to actually put that money aside and then run the numbers, let compound interest do the work, and then have something to retire? And I think I've always been stubborn enough to know that to do the thing now that's in my longer term best interests.
That's got to be quite rare, and it's for, in human nature. What was your quality of life like back then? Did you have a social life? Did you go on holidays or nothing?
So my life at the time was, in my music days, I was living in a 6-bedroom house in Golders Green with jazz musician friends.
Loud house.
There were 2 drummers, 1 bass player, 2 sax players. It was an amazing life. It's one of those lives where at the time you're like, I'm just hanging out with my mates. Yeah. But now you get older and you look back and you don't know how lucky you were to live in that environment. Just not only surrounded by friends, but surrounded by music the whole time. And our rent was 350 quid a month for a room in that house. It was very, we didn't spend much money. We kind of cooked together and went out and did gigs. And on a gig, you get fed. You can live a really good life with not very much money. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, certainly for me, this little voice in my head was this isn't going to last forever. One day you're going to be out on your own, and then these numbers aren't going to work. When you're 70.
Most people I speak to say, I wish I'd figured this out earlier. Do you wish you hadn't had it at that point in your life?
What a question. I can't say I had that wish. No, I mean, because I think that way of thinking. I think with money, the more that you learn, the more that you discover about how the world works, the wiser you become, and the more able you are to use various economic forces to your own benefit. So it's difficult to say, regret the thing that never happened. But there's certainly an element of, a little bit later when I was living abroad and teaching English. So I spent 4 years living in Japan, and I had a bit more money at that point. I was getting paid a couple of grand a month as an English teacher, and had a little bit left over. But I was still saving huge amounts for that same reason. And I do look back at that now and think, there were so many ways that that was a really unique opportunity to be there in Japan, to be living that life. I was kind of conflicted between that. Do I spend that money to really enjoy Japan, to enjoy this experience, or do I put it aside because, the whole retirement thing?
It's getting
closer. So there's definitely been a lot, significant periods where I probably could have and maybe should have spent more liberally to enjoy the experiences that you only have at that time of life. But, I think it's always a risky game to sort of wish away the stuff that you had, because then that doesn't make you what you are today, right?
I can really relate in the sense of, I feel like I wasted my 20s because of bad financial decisions in my early 20s that took me a long time to dig out of. So then it was, now that I earn more money than I ever have, it's need to screw it all away so that, when I'm 40, I'm financially free or whatever. And then I sit there thinking, are you going to regret this decision, Damien? Because the trend has been actually that you earn more every year. And I find it really hard to kind of decide what the best thing to do is. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I mean, but I think, the entrepreneurial case is a special one because when you get into entrepreneurship, you kind of start to realize that all the rules and your way of looking at the world that you grew up with, you realize that's just something that someone made up somewhere at some point. And it's actually, it's not, and they're not these fixed boundaries. But when earlier on in life, you don't know what's around the corner. And so, when I was teaching English, I was basically settling down for a career of doing that. And there wasn't much prospect of, when you're an English teacher, you typically earn the same when you're 60 as you do when you're 30. You get paid for an hour of teaching, and you do it because you love it, and it's the most fulfilling, rewarding work. And I wouldn't change that for a second. I learned so much doing that. But it was also true that I knew that that financially not much was going to change for the rest of my career, and so that I think that brought home the need to act now and do something about it now.
Because you're not going to see a spike in earnings. You're not going to see that spike. You've got to have a linear saving, basically.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and even if you're in a career where you do have prospects for progressing and for, getting promotions and even making adjacent moves or whatever, there's still generally a limit on what you can expect to earn during the career. You can pretty much spreadsheet the whole thing out based on what you can expect to earn, right? And so based on that, you can figure out, okay, well, if I want X when I retire, this is what I need to do now. And so that's how I was behaving at the time. I don't have great expectations for anything to change. And so the decision I make now, month by month, based on my paycheck when it arrives, this right now is going to define what happens later. And so I think one of the things I always did was automate savings and have the money pots. I don't remember where. I mean, a lot of people give this advice, I don't know, about automation being the key to personal finance. So when your money arrives every month from your work, a certain amount goes off into savings. You don't even see it, so you don't miss it. And then that automation then, is the thing that really has the power and compounds over time. So I did that.
Much harder when you did it, though. It's much easier to do that now.
It is,
you were doing this at a time that was...
It's 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Was it HL? That kind of Hargreaves Lansdown was maybe the broker of choice at the time. AJ Bell?
I mean...
Legacy brokers, I would call them.
I don't even remember. I had a Hargreaves Lansdown account, yeah.
But it would have been clunky tech.
But it was still miraculous at the time though, because you're like, damn, I can sit on my laptop in my little apartment in Tokyo and buy shares in whatever. But it was literally that. It was like I had money land in my NatWest account or whatever, and then there would be a standing order to send it out to Hargreaves Land, like a couple £100 a month or something. And I just had that going.
Did any other of your friends invest like you, or were you like
I was the only one?
Because like Damien said, I feel like I wasted my 20s, and I feel like a lot of people put pressure on themselves, like when they're in their 30s and 40s. Like, I should have invested earlier. And ideally, we all start investing when we're like 5, and we compound for our whole lives. But like, do you not think that we put a bit too much pressure on, like, you need to be doing this all in your 20s? Like, you were the outlier in your friends group.
I was definitely an outlier, but you've got to bear in mind that I was surrounded by jazz musicians and English teachers who like, for the most part, with the best will in the world, are not thinking like personal finance first. That's not their main thing, right? I mean, if I'd been, I had other groups of friends from school who'd gone on to be like lawyers and bank. Like, they live finance on a daily basis, so they're much more tuned into this kind of stuff. They also, had employer contributions and things like that. As a musician, you have none of that stuff. And typically you're not thinking much about, you're not reading books on personal finance and all of that. So I was definitely an outlier. And I remember, with my mates in the shared house, from time to time I would say things like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to change my ISA to this," or "I'm going to open a pension here," and they just look at me like
you're crazy.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about? So I was definitely an outlier for sure.
But I challenge that you probably have exhibited the skill set to be an investor through all the endeavors that you've done. Like a musician, right? It's like a multi-year sacrifice to be at a level where you're good. You've learned 8 languages, which is just wild, and again, that's a commitment of time, of years, and investing it's like a lot of work to see a payoff down the line. I feel like that's your personality type.
That's a very interesting point that I hadn't thought about. So I often get asked in the language world, I often get asked what's the connection between music and languages? Because I think we all like to, it's nice to think that, okay, if you're good at music, that should help you out at languages. I personally don't think there's any connection between the two. The only thing that I think music really helps with is if you've got a good ear from music, it helps you hear accents in different languages. So it helps you speak like Spanish with a more Spanish accent than you might otherwise. But one of the things that I found that music was really useful for was that it trains you to be able to sit in a room and work on a piece of music hard for hours a day, going through the process of being like useless at it. You don't even know the notes, you can't play it. You train yourself to play it, to learn the piece, to practice it, and then go and perform it. That's like you say, is a multi-step thing that takes place over days, weeks, and months. And so when it came to learning languages, it's very much the same thing. It takes time. There's not much you can do in a week or a month, but a lot you can do in a year. And so I think the music trained me to be patient and just diligently work at the language every day for the future payoff. And now that you mention it, I think it's exactly the same thing with investing. It's like, am I prepared to sacrifice my afternoon to practice the piano or to learn Japanese or whatever, so that in the future I can play the music or speak the language? Like, answer yes. With investing, am I prepared to sacrifice 300 quid from my salary this month so that I don't have to live off baked beans and toast when I'm 70? Yeah, it's a similar spectrum.
My financial markets risk management lecturer at university said that investing is the sacrifice of consumption today in the hope of greater consumption tomorrow. And that's exactly what you've just said. It's like a sacrifice of your time and effort, or your resources, which represent time and effort, in the hope that you might get better. And it's the same with like playing an instrument, right? It's like a frustrating process almost of sacrifice.
It's not breaking news, right? With investing, this is the whole thing, isn't it? It's like it's sacrifice now for something more later. But I mean, do you think that what determines someone? What makes the difference between someone that actually does that and doesn't? Because if you boil it down, it's super simple, right? Take from whatever age, take 10% of your salary, invest it, and never touch it. Like, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Yet most people don't do it. I mean, what do you think makes the difference between someone actually doing it and not?
Awareness of like your own mortality. Like, if you become aware, maybe you've had a child, which I think like that helps with that. Like, you become aware of like, there's a life outside of me. I am getting older and I now have to care for people outside of myself. Or as you get older, I think it's almost like a cliche at 35, you become aware of your health and your wealth, and you start going on runs and saving. For someone in their 20s, I think you're a rare breed there. And I think it's the same kind of rare breed of to learn 8 languages and be a highly skilled musician in your 20s. You know, I was playing around in the mud, going out on nights out and drinking beers. You know, so I think we all get there, maybe, or most do, but
it's also confidence, like confidence and knowledge. You're like, well, if I invest my money, I don't know what I'm doing, I could lose it. And that could affect my life. Whereas if I just keep doing what I'm doing, I'm having fun and I'll figure it out later on.
Yeah.
So like a lot of it, I think it's got to be confidence.
Yeah.
And people, like I've got friends that know they should invest. And like, I want to get started. And they always say, should I invest in this? What should I invest in? And it's just, they're educated, but they just don't have the confidence to, or know where to put their money.
Yeah. I think the education piece is absolutely fundamental. We see this in entrepreneurship a lot as well, where the thing that really, you know, you put 10 people on, you start 10 people off on an entrepreneurship journey with the same goal, same resources, and you get 10 wildly different outcomes. Like one person goes on to make millions, the other person's still stuck where they are like 10 years later. What makes the difference? I mean, fundamentally, it's education. If you know what to do, then all you've got to do is decide, okay, am I going to do it or not? But if you don't know what to do, then you just don't have options. And it's the same thing. Like, how many people say like investing is risky or starting a business is risky, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Like, it's risky not to do it from the other perspective, right? So I feel like there's an education piece, which is like where what you guys do is so important. Just raising awareness of like the fundamentals and the fact that it is urgent and pressing now, today, because every day that you're not doing it, you're missing out on the compounding effect in the future. So yeah, I mean, I feel it's this combination of education which has to be in place, plus then it's just down to your own person, right? Am I going to actually do this or not? And that's I don't know how to account for that.
Cybersecurity is becoming a growing concern for businesses in the UK. Hacking, phishing, duping. Look, I get it. I see people spoofing my account and likeness all of the time online to scam people. So if you want to get your business cyber secure and prove that you're secure, then you need to check out our partner, Vanta. Whether you're a startup growing fast or you're already established, Vanta can help you get certified with stuff like GDPR and ISO 27001 without all of the headaches. Vanta massively reduces the time and effort you need to spend on cybersecurity. For example, the questionnaires that you have to fill out to prove you're compliant with these standards. With Vanta, you can get them done up to 5 times faster. The beauty is Vanta allows you to stop stressing over cybersecurity, taking up headspace so you can focus on what you do best, which is growing your business. You can get $1,000 off today by going to vanta.com/makingmoney. There's a link in the description for you. I think we're impatient as well, you know, as humans. And I think for the majority of human civilization, men were lucky to get past 35.
Right.
So like this idea that we live to 90 is not within us. And I think we're very bad at projecting forward for retirement in that sense, when, you know, like we would all be, you might be dead, you know, and we would certainly be considered old in that point. And I think it's only really in the last 100 years that people have had to think about living to 100. You know, and I think that's right. Tough for people.
Yeah, to do. And it's you know, when you think about the effect of basic investing and compounding, like, it's difficult enough to save for a retirement that starts at 65. The idea that you're going to work from the age of like 20 to 60 in order to fund a retirement from 60 to 100 is like, the maths are getting harder and harder the longer it works, right? Which just makes it even more important to start early, which comes back to the education piece, right?
People struggle to not eat the burger, like when they know that it destroys their health long term. People struggle not to smoke. Like,
we are all kinds of messed up.
Short term, aren't we? We're like, we just want the scratch the itch in the short term. Yeah. It's like the get rich quick stuff. Like, why do people find crypto so alluring, but not, you know, I can sit there and go, the S&P 500 has compounded at a rate of 10% for 100 years, and that's not exciting. Yeah. But, you know, shitcoin's gone up 100% in a day. That I'll put my money on that, you know?
Yeah.
Guys, we completely skipped over the fact that you speak 8 languages.
I know.
Like, I don't know how you guys, I'm just like, 8 languages. 8 languages. What are the 8 languages, and how did you learn them? Because most people learn by living in the country.
So I did French and German at school, like pretty much everybody did at the time, and I did okay. I did GCSE, but I had no reason to learn. So I went on a French exchange when I was 14. I kind of left school pretty much with the same level of language that everyone has at that stage, which is basically nothing. You can ask, where's the train station in French? And
where la gare?
There you go. So you
just want to show off. That's what drops some French knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had some awareness of what it meant to learn a language, but that's where it stopped. When I went to uni, I went to music college, and I was surrounded by people from different countries. Like most of the people there in that college were from other countries. And at one point, I had a job in Cafe Nero. Cafe Nero, 7 Dials. That was 2000. And I was making coffee in Cafe Nero, surrounded by like French, Italian, Japanese, Swedish, and all these people could not only speak English, but they could often speak each other's languages as well. So the Italian barista was like speaking Spanish with this, and I was just, that's the coolest thing. And I just felt really, really inept, because I was like the typical monolingual British guy, couldn't, they all had to speak English for my benefit. And that, for some reason, it just got me, and I didn't like that. So I said, right, I'm gonna learn language. So I started with French. So I went to Paris, got a job working in a youth hostel in Paris, and spent 6 months there. Was working hard, was speaking with people, and by the end of it, I was pretty confident in French. And the main thing that did was it gave me the confidence to say, hey, if I want to, I can learn a language. I know I can do it. So after that, I went back to London and went back to university, because I'd taken a year out in order to go to Paris. A stupid decision, really, but it is what it is. Went back to London, and now I was like playing music with these guys from Brazil and Spain, and I got really interested in their cultures and their countries, and I thought, well, this guy speaks Spanish. Why can't I go and learn Spanish? I've just learned French, and so I would spend more time. I like get the textbook and I sit down. I just study, and I just do exactly what I did to learn French. So I learned French, Spanish, Portuguese, all while I was living in London, and then I changed careers. Went to teach English in Japan, so I learned Japanese. Went to the Middle East. I lived in Qatar and Egypt, so I learned some Arabic.
You're saying this like it's so simple.
I know, right?
Like, I went to Japan, so I learned Japanese, and like these are not easy. Like I dated a Chinese girl, and I tried. And
I can barely
Chinese
talk English.
Yeah, you can barely talk English. I tried to learn Chinese, like just the alphabet. I couldn't get my head around it because it's all symbols. So I assume Japanese is similar with the alphabet. You've got to draw the characters.
And it's worse because there are 3 different scripts. So it uses Chinese characters, but it also has 2 native Japanese scripts as well.
Is it tonal, the language?
Japanese is not, no.
No.
Chinese is.
Mandarin Chinese is, Cantonese is.
Yeah.
Languages like Thai are tonal as well. But I think the thing is with this, it's a lot like music, where everything is difficult when you're coming at it for the first time from the outside. You think like, oh my God, all these different things I've got to learn all the grammar and the languages and the tones and the pronunciation, and man, and then you realize you sort of eating a bowl of rice and you leave your chopsticks sticking up, and you've just offended everyone in the room, right? And it's like, oh, all this stuff I've got to learn. But in my experience, the thing that you just sit down and make the decision you're going to learn, and then get at it and just don't stop until you've learned. Like the thing that you're motivated to do is the thing that's easy.
But they say some people have like different types of brain. Like they say one was like a language brain, like I did English, Spanish, French, all these like theology, whereas some people have like a financial brain, which is all like maths and numbers. Do you think that works? Do you think that's true? And do you think you have a language brain, so it's a bit easier for you?
I think so. I think that you've got the classic distinction is like the sciences versus the humanities, right? So some people will do like history, languages, music. Other people will do chemistry, physics, and maths. In broad brushstrokes, from the people I meet, that tends to be true. Like scientists tend to have a very, very specific characteristics, and people that do humanities, art, music, they have other characteristics. I think that inevitably I probably do have a certain aptitude for languages and music, and the fact that I gravitated towards them, it explains that. There's plenty of things I tried to do that I was not good at that I didn't do. Like you don't catch me doing ballroom dancing very often, but if I was good at that, maybe I would have done that instead. I don't know. So there's a certain element of survivorship bias in there, but I always feel at the same time, because people say this with languages, right? So they watch my YouTube channel and they'll see me talking about languages, and they'll see me, I've recorded whole series on YouTube where I've like gone to a country and learnt the language. So I go to Thailand for 2 weeks, like study intensively, and then have half-hour conversation entire at the end of it. I film the whole thing, put it on YouTube, and people will message me and say like, have you just got the language gene? Is it just easy for you? Like, do you have to be talented? And I normally say, well, let's just say that that's true. Now what?
You still have to do the work, don't you?
You're still sat in the same place, left with the same decision in front of you. Let's say that you have to have a certain talent to learn a language. Okay, great. You don't have it? All right. Now what? You're not going to do it then? You're just going to give up on you and not try? So I think my observation from music was always the same as well, which is that if you do have a natural talent, at most it's 5% of the overall outcome, because 95% is the hard work. You don't find people who would like come out of the womb playing Rachmaninoff piano concertos. It doesn't happen. They have to spend 18 years of their life becoming absolutely ridiculous at the piano in order to be able to do that. And then that natural talent is the 5% that might make the difference between them being like number 1 in the world and number 6 in the world. But like it all comes down to the hard work. I know some of the most ridiculously talented polyglots in the world, right? Who speak.
There we go.
There it is.
There we go.
What is a polyglot? Sounds like someone who likes to eat a lot or something.
Yeah,
or have lots of wives.
Have lots of wives, exactly. So polyglot is someone that speaks lots of languages.
Oh.
Yeah.
When does it become a poly? Like more than 4?
Yeah, it's just hotly debated in the language world.
You're definitely one though.
I can imagine this is like a bonus because someone with 2 wants to claim the poly title. And
right, yes. I mean, you know, who knows? I mean, if you speak 1 language, you're monolingual. 2 languages, you're bilingual. 3 languages, trilingual. Yeah, you hear that. Well, you hear that word used. 4 up, you're a polyglot, I would say. But then you get into, then there's 1 up from there, which is hyper polyglot, and that's, I don't know I think it's like
8. Let's go with 8. Let's go with 8.
Yeah, 8, 10, something like that.
Yeah,
and that's
hyper.
Typically people that just like devote their life to learning languages. I don't put myself in that category at all. I'm too so I've never studied languages for the sake of the languages. It's always been for a particular purpose.
Well, I was going to say, you said that if you might be naturally good at languages, like it gives you like a 5% increase, because in the end you still have to do the work.
Yeah.
I assume that's the same for finance. So people are like, I'm bad with money, I'm bad with investing, I'm bad with maths. Like you just do the work and you'll still be able to invest as successfully as the average person, would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I'm not the investment professional, but it seems to me, and you know, you can tell me what you guys think, but it seems to me that the basics of personal finance are considerably simpler than learning a new language.
You don't need the high skill, and actually the jury's out on whether these guys can beat the simple approach.
Right, yeah.
In 5 minutes, you could say to someone basically what they need to do, and all they need then is to go away and go, what is an index fund? What is an ISA? Do those 2 bits of research and
then the hard thing, even if you automate it, then like the hard thing, the behavior that you actually need to exhibit to not, royally screw it up is just don't get bored and start meddling, right? Like, and that in many ways is the hardest thing of all.
Speaking of bored and meddling, one thing that kind of is interesting about your story is you were this really successful musician and then you were pulled away by languages, which surely was a bad use of your time from a like, your peers would have been practicing their instrument, and then this kind of like serendipity that led to your business. Like, how did you deal with that in the moment of like, I'm probably throwing away my music career here so I can speak to the Brazilian lads?
Yeah. I mean, it's so difficult. When I look back on it, I was just being pulled around. I mean, I was so young. I was being. The truth of the matter is, I was being pulled around by emotions and life experience and just following my gut. There was no master plan here. Like it wasn't intentional. It was just, I'm someone who, when I get a bee in my bonnet about something, you just can't stop me doing it. I'm stubborn and I'll just keep going at it. And it's the same. I'm the same today with the stuff that I do. Right. There was something about the musician lifestyle that wasn't for me. I loved the music. I spent years of my life doing it. I was really good at it. But there was just something about the lifestyle that didn't sit well with me, and it's difficult for me to understand what that was. It's probably a mix of the social thing and the professional thing. I think also, honestly, there was an element of when you play jazz and you're performing, you're always being judged by somebody, right? Someone is out there whenever you perform, people are always listening to you. They're always either enjoying what you're doing or they're not. Being surrounded by a lot of peers who are also great musicians, everyone's super nice, but they're also kind of judging you. Is he good? Is he not? For me, I didn't cope with that very well. I think I was too immature or not like in that, whatever aspect of your psyche that is, I wasn't well enough developed in that. And I think I found it really difficult to do what you have to do as a musician or an artist, which is to keep putting yourself out there, irrespective of how good your stuff is. It's a bit like starting a YouTube channel.
I was about to say, but then you went from that to YouTube. So it's
you deal in a world of
judged.
experts. The problem is, like in YouTube, you can be speaking to a lot of beginners, so they're kind.
Yeah.
Like, you speak to me and you can impart wisdom on me that might seem simple to you, but people who like jazz really like jazz, and they know what good jazz is, and it's a very high level.
Right, and the nature of the community is that you're kind of, there's not much of a public appreciation for jazz. So most of the time, you're with other musicians. You're playing for each other's benefit a lot of the time, and I think I just didn't cope very well with that whole kind of peer pressure, and other musicians, like friends of mine, will hear that and they'll say, "What peer pressure? Everyone's supportive," and they are, but it's just I think it wasn't for me, and so I started to eventually just stop putting myself out there, and there was a gradual decline over a few years where I just started to pull back from it. At the same time, as I was pulling back from that, I was spending loads of time learning languages. So I would go out and I would just devote 2 years to learning Portuguese. And but what actually the catalyst actually for me moving into doing languages professionally was the financial crisis. Actually, to 2008. I was you had this impression at the time, this general feeling at the time that the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Everything was had just shut down. The housing market had just completely stalled. Businesses had stopped spending. Musicians suddenly had no work, and it was all this general feeling of now's the time to make a break for things. And I'd always had this pipe dream of traveling the world teaching English. My uncle did that. And, he lived all around the world, like Italy, Thailand, France, Slovenia, teaching English. And it sounded like such a sort of romantic career path. And I always had this pipe dream of doing that. I'd never thought about it seriously because I had the music. I thought, well, I have to stick with the music. But 2008 was the kind of the tipping point. So I retrained and I did a language teaching course, 4 weeks, pretty quick, and then went off, got a job in Japan, moved to Japan and started teaching. And then I spent 4 or 5 years teaching English in Japan and the Middle East. And so what happened was, after that period of time, about 5 years or so, when I was literally just searching for the next thing to do with my life, what happened in the background was that I developed this real skill with learning languages and speaking languages, but also with teaching languages. So the professional angle to that was the teaching of it. And so when I ended up starting my business, which was 2013, on the side, evenings and weekends, what I was able to do was marry up these dual abilities of being able to teach languages, but also having done the thing and learned the languages myself, which kind of created this unique angle. And that was what the seed of the business was, and I see that now around a lot of the time. Being very good at one thing is great, but the real superpower is being good at two adjacent things and combining them, and that's what can create real fireworks. Like, for example, knowledge of personal finance plus being good on camera. Like that combination of things. If you lacked either one of those, it wouldn't work. But often combining two skills can create something completely new.
These kind of adjacent skills that complement each other that might not be that obvious. Like a doctor with personal speaking, they end up on TV,
right?
Like talking about, Dr. Zand and these guys. They're probably not the best doctors on the planet, but because they've got that ability to talk, or a bit of AI to a HR person could make them the most valuable person in the business, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
One group of people that don't really seem to get much help with their finances are small business owners. They're not really big enough to have a CFO or a finance director, so they often outsource work to do with their finances, like accounting. This can result in a few things, but one of them is They don't get good, actionable advice on what to do with the excess money inside of their business. And what normally happens is they just leave that cash sat in a business bank account, getting no interest. This is why we're happy that we're partnering with Tide. They offer an instant access saver account where new customers can get 4.07% AER variable on unlimited deposits until June 1st, 2025. If you'd like to put the excess capital in your business bank account to good use, head to the link in the description. You'll also find there the full offers, T's and C's and Tide's terms. The variable rate is correct as of the 19th of December, 2024. That business now, Story Learning, became a $10 million business. You've got a personal brand now, as you call it, which is more business mentorship. And, you talk about the business of
teaching what I did with the business.
Yeah, so you teach about how you built the business, and that's become a huge success as well. Do you think that what you've done can be replicated by anyone? Or do you think you're the kind of guy that learns 8 languages, knows how to play jazz? Are you special in that sense?
It's so difficult to answer that question. I mean, I certainly think that, I think a number of things are true, right? I think you can do anything when you set your mind to it. I think it's not always obvious the value of the skills and knowledge you have in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I think if you go out, there's a lot of stuff there that if you go out and learn, you can discover all new ways of doing things that you never thought of. I think the hardest thing inevitably is just getting started, because everything before you do it seems hard. It seems difficult. We are burdened by these fallacies like business is risky, investing is risky, and there's kind of a threshold that you cross, I think, and once the important thing is to cross it somehow in some way. Like the day you started your YouTube channel, you cross that threshold, right? Everything else is downstream of that. But I think with business, like, not every passion can become a business, and not every person can make a business out of their passion. But there are many ways of doing it, and you never know in advance what's going to work. I've done so many, like, of every 10 things I try, one of them works. So it's a mindset. It's education comes into it. There's a lot of luck as well. Mm-hmm. I think. But I come back to the same thing. It's like, well, let's say that not everyone can do it. Now what?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do? You're just going to sit there and be like, not me. Yeah. I think I want to double click on something about not understanding the value of your skill set in the market.
Yeah.
So I worked in finance and I was in financial sales. And my job was to explain to people who had never heard of a finance product why they needed it. Yeah. And I thought that was $100,000 a year skill, because that's what I earned from doing that, even though I was probably generating revenues of millions for the business.
Right.
Yeah. It was only once I took that skill set and put it on camera that I was like, okay, this is actually worth a lot more. This just the idea of going, this is the finance product and this is probably why you should use it. Yeah.
Right. So I think your example of your job is an interesting one, right? So you make $100,000 a year doing sales.
Yeah.
I think for people, when you're brought up to think about the job market or your career as a thing, everything seems fixed, right? Okay, well, if I get a job, that's how much I'll be paid. Like, this is just the way of the world. But if you step outside that paradigm for a minute, you say, okay, you're getting paid $100,000 a year for your job. But what's the mechanism behind that? The mechanism behind that is there is a business that has figured out that it can pay Damo $100,000 in order to make $500,000. Mm. There's a business behind that is making that mechanism work. Pay person $100K, generate $500K. That's what a business is doing. Behind the business, somewhere, is a guy or a girl who started it up and is now not only using your labor to generate money for the business, but everyone else in the business as well. And that's all coming together to make that person just orders of magnitude more. And so your knowledge and your skills is by definition worth way more than you're actually getting paid for it. But not only that, when we go out and we look for jobs, we see the jobs that are available and we're competing with other people for those jobs. Someone somewhere at some point has decided, I think what's appropriate to pay Damo for that job is $100,000. What determines that? It's kind of market forces, right? It's a bit of supply and demand. If it becomes more difficult to get salespeople, then they might have to up the salary to 110, 120 to attract more people. If suddenly there's a flood of people learning sales, that salary might drop because you've got more supply of people. But it's all fundamentally completely arbitrary, and it has no bearing on the actual value of your skill set. So then you start the YouTube channel and you realize that same skill set applied in a slightly different way is now worth presumably many, many times more than it was. So in my case, 2015, I quit my English teaching job. My salary at the time, I was living in Egypt. I was working for a British company. I had like a local salary that was not very much because you didn't need much to live locally, and they would pay you a sterling supplement that you could, save up. That was £850 a month. So that was what the market had determined that the sort of rateable value of my skill set was. Everything that I'd learned, the person I'd become, all of that was worth 850 quid. The exact same knowledge in my head, applied in a slightly different way and distributed by the internet, is now worth millions. Mm-hmm. How can that be the case? It's because it's just the whole construct around the way that the business and economics and salaries work. It's all arbitrary. It's all constructed. And so the most important thing to realize, I think, is that everyone's got skills and knowledge and experience, which applied in a slightly different way isn't just going to make you an extra 10% a year. It can make you 10 times what you currently make. All of that is possible, but it's very difficult to see until you're on the other side of that. Until you're on the other side of that fence.
Yeah, and when you realise like scale, value at scale is like what creates wealth, right? And me speaking to one client and doing a deal that I might have been like, oh, the deal's worth $1 million and I get this commission off it, and that's great. And it was really technical and like drawn out and laborious process in the weeds. And my understanding was, I know the really technical elements of this business and these finance products, and that's what makes me valuable. But then I go and talk about index funds to 1 million people a month, and I earn way more money, even though to me that knowledge is like, I would say that to my mates all the time and just be like, you should do this, and they'd be like, whatever. But it's like, we have this belief that the more technical and detailed we get, the more valuable we become. But actually, if you can communicate quite simple messages that are valuable to a lot of people at scale, you can earn just as much money, if not loads more, right?
Yeah, I mean, and what you're talking about there is essentially taking a skill set and then making that available to a wider marketplace, to the public as a whole. The opposite can also be true. I mean, like what I do with my business work now is it's actually the complete opposite. Mm-hmm. So it's more like taking my knowledge and then helping a small number of specific individuals. And so it can work both ways. But it's more that any business that you work for is only going to want a certain amount of your skill set and your labor, and so that only represents a tiny fraction of what you can actually do. The amount of stuff that you knew as a person that you would never have even, I mean, how much stuff did you know? How much knowledge did you have that you'd never even use in your job?
Oh yeah,
previously?
You talk about it, you'd be like, shut up, Damien, go sell the widgets. It's not your passion, is it? It's just the thing that you do. And
it's the thing that you do. Yeah.
I mean, this is probably a silly question to ask, but I do want to come back to this point of like, your personal finances, and then you made this business. How did your finances change? Like, and all that effort that you put in your 20s to save, and then you start the business, what happened?
So the main difference between like then and now is that back then I was really spending a lot of time learning about personal finance. I was listening to all the podcasts, I was reading the books, I was researching these different funds and thinking, okay, well, should I move money from this fund to this fund? Should I take save 12% instead of 10%? Should I like going very deep in the weeds? And trying to essentially kind of carve out a percentage point here and a percentage point there on what was fundamentally a very, very low starting point. I was able to put such little money into monthly savings that, if I'm putting 200 quid a month in, what's an extra 1% on 200 quid? It's not really going to move the needle. Whereas now I spend virtually no time thinking about personal finance at all, because what's changed is, thanks to the businesses that I have, I'm able to actually just contribute a lot more in the first place. Which, when you think about reaching a specific goal, makes far more of an impact than, so rather than figuring out how to eke out an extra 0.5 or 1-2% on what you've already got, if you can just put a lot more in the first place, then you realize actually that 1% here and there doesn't actually matter all that much. And so what it makes me think of a lot is that rather than spending all that time trying to figure out like, how do I optimize this thing, if I at the time could have just gone and figured out how to increase my income in the first place, then that would have got me so much further towards my goal than that continued tweaking around the edges. And so that's the main thing that's changed really is just noticing how it's not really the specific decisions you make around this fund and that fund, but it's like, how much can you actually put in there in the first place?
I think that becomes a lot easier once like you've got this vehicle that compounds at a much bigger rate. You start to go, okay, well, my business is doing 100% a year, 200% a year, even 50. What the market 9 or 10 that put my efforts here, and that's like the thing that I've had to kind of have a conversation with myself about. It doesn't necessarily make sense to rip money out my business to get it taxed at 40% to bang it in an ISA when I could keep it in the business and reinvest it, hire this guy. So, buy the podcast, these kind of decisions. But for someone sat at work, they've got their job and a 9% a year pay rise isn't on the cards. That's not an easy thing to get, right? How do they start to go about looking for those opportunities and kind of develop that? Because we can sit here and say this, can't we? But it's not that easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to give people advice about this because it has to be a personal decision, and it has to be, like we were talking about earlier, I think people are geared towards different things. So for me, like language is like, all day long, but you get me, tell me to go and learn, I don't know, watercolor painting. I'm not going to do very well. So I think, like in my case, which is the easiest thing to talk about, I started a side hustle, and that's what I did, right? So I was working full time in an English teaching job, and I decided to write a blog on the side, and I was doing that evenings and weekends, and I just kind of did it for a couple of years while I was living in the Middle East, and that was what worked for me. That's not so easy for everybody. If you've got kids and family and maybe working 2 jobs and stuff, that's not so easy. So I think there are a few different ways to think about it. I mean, there's the side hustle route. There's the more extreme route of starting a business in the first place. But then even within work, there are different ways to think about it. So I mean, I know people that coach people to get to negotiate salary rises at work, they coach people to get promotions faster than they might otherwise be, or even to go back and retrain and allow yourself to enter a career path with more earning potential. There's so many different ways to sort of think about that question of raising your income. And I think what I've observed in recently has been that I've got friends that teach people this stuff. I have a friend who works works with people in tech and actually teaches them. Here is step by step how you negotiate a salary rise, and she often gets people 50%, 100% salary rises, and she does it by getting them to realize exactly what their value is to the business, understanding what the business's criteria are for their salary bands and what they pay people. And once you understand how that all works, then you can actually go about taking deliberate steps to actually do that. That is not my world at all, but I see it happening, and it's crazy. And I always feel that, I notice this within my own businesses and people who work for me and with me. The salary that someone gets is, in a way, completely arbitrary. If someone comes and demonstrates to me that they're able to bring more business in, or they're able to help the business grow by this much, they've essentially got the power. I hope no one's listening to this, but they've essentially got the power to come to me and say, look, here's the stuff that I've done to help the business. I want more money. And I'd be stupid to say no. So, it's everything's very dependent on individual circumstances, but I think it has to start with seeing the bigger picture seeing the different options on the table and seeing like what makes sense for me given the constraints that I've got and given where I, what I do and who I work with.
One reason that salespeople always get paid higher is because they see the revenues that they generate.
Right.
This is what the admin staff and like the accountants would always be like, why do sales guys get paid so much? It's because if I'm bringing in a 2 million quid deal, I'm not going to ask for $1,000, you know, like, and I think you understand the flow of money from a business that you operate in. You start to then know, okay, well, my cog in the machine is worth this much, so I should be getting more. Go on, T. Sorry, mate.
No worries. I've got an example just in case people are like, oh, I don't want to start a YouTube channel. I don't want to be I don't want to teach people things. Like, I've got, obviously I always have car problems because, with my Mercedes. And I took it to the garage, spent £920 on it, got it back. 2 days later, the engine was making noises. So I was in the gym and then one guy came up to me in the car park. He's like, hey, I work for Mercedes. Like, you going to sell your car? Like, do you love your car? I'm like, yeah, I love it. But like, it's giving me a few issues. He's like, take my number. If you have any problems, call me. So I got it back from the garage, called him up. I'm like, yeah, my car, they didn't fix it at the garage. He's like, no worries. I'll come to your house. I'll look at it. It'll cost you 150 quid cash, like ideally. I was like, no problem. So he came with his van, all the Mercedes tools, looked at it, ordered some parts, got me discount on the parts, fixed the parts. And he's like, your car should be running now. If you want to buy a new car, I'll come with you, help you check out the car, make sure it's all right. I'll charge you like 50 quid for that. Any parts you need, I'll get you discount. And like all these things. And he taught me what he was fixing in the car. He's like, this is what they did wrong. They should have fixed this. So his job is Mercedes mechanic, like 9 to 5. Yeah. But on the weekends and the evenings, he comes, he goes to see his individual clients. And I'm like, how do you get all your clients? He's like, I just see anyone with Mercedes, I walk up to them like, how are you finding it? I know it's expensive to fix. I can come to your house and fix it for you. So he's using his day job skills and he's created so much revenue off like in his spare time using the same skills he does in the daytime. And now I don't trust any garage. I'm only going to him because he's a Mercedes specialist.
Get his number off
He knows his stuff and he gets me discount and he comes to my house and I have to go to the garage.
Yeah, but before the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the mega corporations in the 20th century, this is the way the world works. You're a baker, you're a blacksmith, I'm a farmer. We all trade stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's got skills. Even if you're sat in an office all day, like I work with a guy who teaches people Microsoft Excel skills. So even if all you do at work is spreadsheets, I know a guy who evenings and weekends, what he does is he films himself, he records himself doing really, really fancy stuff on Excel, like amazing stuff, and then he teaches tutorials on how to improve your Excel skills. He makes 6 figures a year doing just that. He started it off in his spare time, and his whole line is basically stand out and impress your boss with your Excel skills. And he's now quit his job and he's making started a whole new business doing just that. We've all got these skills, but when you start to look around your community, your city, and the world, like the world works through this basic principle of supply and demand and needs that you can fulfill. And so it comes right back to that awareness thing. So often, if you're aware of the opportunities, then there are things you can do. You can go on Upwork or Fiverr, and whatever skill you've got, you can start selling that by the hour today. And you can often make a lot of money doing that. So I think it starts with that awareness of what's needed, and then the ideas then can start to percolate.
And tell people what you do. Like the Mercedes guy, I started buying buy-to-let properties up north, and it was all because I sat down with an old friend that I worked with like 15 years ago, and he just said, I own 6, but I'm sick of selling. What I want really is I would like to manage units. So if I could find like houses for someone, go through the whole buying process for them, they buy it, and then they give it to me to manage, and I'll charge them 10% of the rent. And I was like, that sounds great. So like, because the incentives align in terms of he needs to find houses that will rent so that he can get the management fee, because otherwise he doesn't. And I was like, I'll do that. And he was like, what? I was like, let's do it. Like, that's perfect. You've got a track record of already doing it. You know what you're doing. You're saying you'd manage the whole process for me, and all you want is 10% of the rent on a monthly basis. I was like, let's go. Yeah. And if he hadn't said it out loud, it would have never happened. Right. Yeah. Like, you got to say it. Like, you got to say, this is what I do.
And this is why business people and entrepreneurs go to networking events, dinners, and things like that, because they have 100 conversations and they might all be for nothing, but that one conversation turns into something else. And often I think the thing in common with all of the various things we've all just mentioned is often the best way to start is look at people with
It's all right. We're in a house. Go figure. People think it's a studio, and it's a house.
Yeah. So the thing in common with all of these things that we've mentioned here is that, and this is often a very easy place to start when we're looking for these kind of ideas, is if you find the people with money and look at the specific problems they've got, then that's often there are many opportunities within that, whether it's the guy with the Mercedes who hasn't got time to fix it, or the person that wants to buy the houses or whatever. That's often a very effective way into these kind of opportunities.
Pay for the expertise to not get ripped off. Like if I was getting work done on my house and I could pay a builder to look at the quote and go, you're getting ripped off, I would pay money for that. Because I have no idea.
Yeah.
The same with the car. You just have no idea. You could be getting ripped off.
I think I did 920 quid and then it broke 2 days later.
I had the same Mercedes. Took my car in, they repaired it, told me $1.5 grand. I was like, it's not fixed, the issue's the same. Took it back in a few weeks. They're like, it's 700 quid to fix it now. I was like, you already charged me $1.5 grand. Don't buy a Mercedes. I think is the answer. Drive around in a banger.
I mean, I often do that now in my businesses whenever we're thinking about doing something new, whether it's like, so if we were going to start a podcast YouTube channel, for example, before starting any of that, I would go and speak to 3 people. I would talk to you and other people that I could find. I'd pay them money, sit them down, say, look, tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I need to know. What should I be thinking about before going into this thing? And just like you say, I'd very happy to sort of to pay for the knowledge and the awareness of how to avoid problems in the first place, because that just makes everything else easier down the line.
Yeah. Another area of this that I know you talk about a lot is this like consistent investment in yourself. That sounds so abstract, doesn't it? And it's like you invest in the market because I can own a slice of Elon Musk. That's to me sounds, like that's a good thing to do, right? Yeah. Investing in myself. How do you think about that? How do people identify what they should be investing in? Yeah.
So, I mean, you're investing in Elon Musk or anything in the wider market, you know what the general rate of return is that's possible to get. As you invest in the wider market for I mean, Elon might be a different case, but on the whole, you know that the range of returns that you're able to get is like, what is it, 7 to 12%? Like that. Like 20% is considered like legend level.
If you consistently hit it, you are the best in the world, basically.
And then otherwise it's all about market timing, right? So if you buy Tesla early, like easy to say now, right? But hindsight's a wonderful thing. But the thing with education in yourself, just like your own business, is that the return that you can get on that investment is 1,000%. I mean, it's literally the case that if you learn a skill or any one of the things that we've mentioned here, you actually invest in learning how to do that thing, that can then open up an opportunity for you, whether it's a promotion or a side hustle or even a business, which can generate literally thousands of percentage points of return if you're just analyzing it from a financial perspective. So with the education, I've always, like right from the beginning, I've always spent a huge amount reinvesting into learning stuff, and I don't. Often it's like sometimes it's very targeted. So, for example, if I wanted to, what would be a good example of this? So, like we were talking earlier about clothes, right? I've always been like the least fashionable person in the room. And recently, because I've been on a lot more video, it's been a pain point for me. And
I never noticed. Maybe because I am the least fashionable. I'm the guy. Right?
Damon has 1,000 t-shirts, all the same, just different shades of colours. But multi-buy.
I always thought you looked well put together, to be honest.
Oh well, thank you very much. I don't hear that from everybody. But I'll take it. And so, I decided recently I'm going to actually put a bit of effort into this. So I'm actually going out now and learning that, hey, guess what? If I put a white hoodie with a black top, like actually that works. And this is something I didn't know before. And it's a silly example, but it's on that same continuum of like, if there's something that I can see is holding me back, then there's someone out there with the solution. I can go and find them, and learning, when you consistently learn these things, then you end up, the skills start to compound. One of the things I did early on in my when I was starting my businesses was in writing. I've always done a lot of writing. It started off as blogging. I send a lot of email. I write newsletters now and write books. And I always took loads and loads of courses from people that teach copywriting. So how do you write stuff online which is impactful and persuasive, and learning to write. I've now been using, it's a skill I've been using over and over again for like over 10 years now to build the various things that I've done. And I use it on a daily basis. So I think you speak to anyone successful, they all invest huge amounts into their own learning, because it's the knowledge which is the gatekeeper to everything else that comes later. So, you know, how to decide what to invest into, I think it comes from understanding where you are, understanding where you want to get to, trying to identify what's in the way, and then having the confidence to go and put some money behind it. So I'm going to find the person who can help me do that. I'm going to learn, and that's often what opens the doors.
One way I think about it is kind of lean into what you're good at and like become really good at it. So one thing that I've always done within my finance videos is have like a storytelling element that because story learn, you know, you like stories as well within languages, and that's how you do it. But for me, it just helps me stand out. So it was like, how do I become world class at this? So I hire a Hollywood scriptwriter, and every Monday we sit down and we just talk about story. We talk about the history of story and like the Greeks and, you know, pathos, logos, ethos. And we also go through scripts and we do that. And I think, you know, rather than going, how can I improve at the stuff I'm necessarily bad at, I also want to become world class at the things that I have a natural ability for. So that, like, you know, those elements then. And then it's a lot. It's like 300 quid a session, right? You know, to sit down with a guy and talk about the Greeks. The payoff might not be instant, but I just think it's those little things that set me apart that mean all the other finance creators who are not doing that, over the years, I will just get to a point where it's like, there's no point even trying to compete with Damien, because he's just like knocking out masterpieces. And it's because I've invested in those kind of things. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, aiming to become. So I was on a panel discussion at Exeter University recently, and it was all for an entrepreneurship society. And a young guy, one of the students stood up and said, he said something like, I'm 21. And I think I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know really what to do next. What advice do you have? And I told him, number one, spend the next 5 years becoming the best in the world at one thing, like whatever that is for you. Go and become develop this, invest in the skill, become the best that you can possibly be at that one thing. Because if you can do that, then that's going to pay your way then for the rest of your life. Because I believe you can become top 1% at most things in the space of 5 years if you really devote yourself to actually learning and studying that thing. And then, like we've talked about before, then if you figure out how best to apply that, whether that's doing something on the internet or something in the real world, whatever it is, you can turn that into you know, at least a side hustle of some kind, like your Mercedes guy. At best, a business that you can then grow into anything. But becoming the best at one thing, or becoming as good as you can possibly be at one thing, is a cheat code. It just gets you so far. The second piece of advice I gave him was to go and work for an entrepreneur, because when you actually work for an entrepreneur, you get to see, you have direct contact with the person who's kind of making those daily decisions, and in contact with the reality of running a business. And there's a mindset and behavioral thing that you can learn from that person, which is you know, you just have to have it. But it's the people with the knowledge, with the skills, with the abilities, who can then harness that and aim it in the right direction, that can really have the power to create anything.
Yeah, I mean, jazz musician, loads of languages, and then a business. You certainly have done that 5-year thing, like you kind of represent it. I've started my YouTube channel 4 years ago.
There you go.
You know, and I'd never picked up a camera, and I had like looking back now, I was just so determined to improve at like every element of it. And I would just attack a single thing. I'd be like, oh, the lighting's crap, so let's just get better at that. Yep. And the mic, or the how to present. And now it's getting to a level where it's like Hollywood script writers. You know, it's like if I'd have started with that, it was not the right level. Yeah. It was just like, how do I improve the audio, and, you know, like incremental tiny improvements over time, 1% every video.
And I think what that also speaks to, especially in the world of online business, is the fact that, you know, I remember when I first got started, I listened to someone on a podcast say, okay, if you want to start a blog, then if you work at it for 5 years, it can become your full-time income. So start something today, work at it consistently for 5 years. In 5 years' time, it can become a real going concern. But it does take that time, and it takes this consistent effort that you're talking about, getting 1% better every single time, and to the point where, like you say, you become so good at it that it just sets you apart from everyone else.
No one wants to try and compete. I mean, look how much better you've got at doing this.
Try 1% or
more relaxed. And actually, if we boil it down, you've only probably done this for 16 days. You know what I mean? Sat in the seat. Obviously, there's a lot around it in terms of research and prep. And like thinking about it has improved.
And you get more comfortable as you like learn more, and you like
just more relaxed. You get used to the cameras. You get used to them being there, as in you forget that they're there is the way.
Yeah, really, but I was thinking, like, I was a bit nervous coming here today because I watched the podcast, right? So I'm familiar with it, and so there's a certain expectation of coming to do something like this, and to want to know that you're not going to completely bomb, and so I wasn't. So I felt the kind of butterflies that I think actually is a good sign of performers. It's what nerves are something that actually can elevate the best performer. Like if you have no nerves, actually you're limiting your ability for like spontaneous stuff, right? But then we sit down, lights are on, cameras on, and I'm just observing myself. I'm sort of straight into I'm on now, so I'm flicking a switch. But that's the result of 12 years of doing.
I was going to say,
these
you've got a lot of history in YouTube.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, every time I used to finish every episode, sweat it, like shirt
Really?
was like dripping.
Yeah.
Deborah Meaden came, I was just like wiping myself subtly
Yeah,
throughout the
we
whole
did Deborah Meaden early though. I mean, that was one of the first season.
Yeah, and I'm like, how
Meaden.
is she sitting in front of me? And I'm just like, and the light felt just 10 times hotter that day. So I was just like,
and we
casually
gave her
just
gone
tried
off
to.
milk. We gave her gone off milk.
Really? Oh, no.
She actually bought her own milk with her because she was like, this happens.
Really?
Yeah,
It was soy milk.
It was oat milk.
Oat milk.
But
oat milk.
yeah, Will, the co-owner of the podcast and one of the producers, he had his oat milk and he didn't realise that porridge can go off too. So he poured this chunky thing in and was like, "There you go, Deborah," and she was like, "What is that?" She's got a lumpy coffee.
Start bringing my own milk. That's a good good
Yeah,
plan,
but I mean, yeah. No, but the incremental improvement is there, and who knows where this will take you in years to come.
My own Batiste podcast. Be great.
Yeah, but
I've got you on a non-compete, mate. You're not
going anywhere.
I own your ass.
So that's the thing. Like you like get 1% better, and you become the best. But at a certain point, you start to get complacent and comfortable. Then and then like the next bright young thing starts doing. And then before you know it, that's how empires are toppled.
This is what you're talking about with the butterflies, though. It's like you've got to be in that zone.
Right.
You've got to be in the red zone of like uncomfortable. I'm always in that place of. It's like it's almost not nice a lot of the time, to be in a position of like, oh God, here we go, do a bigger thing, do a live with the director of the IFS, or like
to Downing Street.
Go to Downing Street, and there's a part of me that wants to go, no, I'll just sit in my bedroom and I'll just make a YouTube video, but there's no growth there.
Yeah, I do feel that comfort is a dangerous thing.
Yeah, massively.
I mean, one of my favorite quotes is that everything you want in life is just on the other side of your comfort zone. And it's like, it's so true. It is so true. And but the harder thing is actually staying there, because I think that it is, the times when I've got complacent, and I have been through times, and I've been doing this for 12 years now. There are times when I've got complacent and I've sort of taken my foot off the gas and thought it never ends well. So what I always encourage people to do is to think about the core skills and values they've got, and then go out and learn how that skill can provide value in different ways, in different guises, in different markets to different people, and just start learning, go on a learning journey, because generally when you find the thing that gels for you, that thing that's aligned, that thing that makes sense, that energetically is just that lights you up, that is, I think, is likely to succeed, because that passion and alignment is going to push you through the hard times. If you try and do stuff like if you start a YouTube channel because you want the money, I guarantee you it's going to fail.
You won't jump the hurdles.
You just you'll as soon as the going gets tough, you'll quit. So I think it's about understanding the skills you've got, understanding your value, figuring out how best to apply that, and then learning.
If you could go back to the 20-year-old self, what would you say to them? differently about like their approach to finances?
You know, I really like Scott Galloway's approach to this, which is your 20s are the time to go out and try as many things as you can, learn as much as you can, meet as many people as you can, because that's where you're going to develop the skills to build the rest of your life on top of. So I would tell myself, I think, to not worry too much about trying to save 10% of a very little amount every month, and rather to put as much as you can into education and experiences, opportunities, and go out and play the field of life and career, because that's the thing that when you find that thing that's yours, that you're great at, that you can do day in, day out because you love it even when the going gets tough, that's the thing that then provides the opportunities that can get you those 100%, 1000% returns. And I think that while it's none of it's guaranteed and it can feel very confusing at the time, if you are excited by that idea, then that's where the magic is.
Thank you, mate.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So while Olly might have got rich after he stopped focusing on personal finance, I still think that little bit of knowledge really helped him out. So what we've done is we've condensed 80% of everything you need to know about personal finances into a 2-page document, and you can access that using the link in the description.